Before we started recording, I said a lot of nice things about you just a few seconds ago. And I talked about how sort of introspective you are, how much you've achieved, your remarkable ability to speak about ideas and things you've discovered in yourself. You really are a standout individual. And so whenever I meet someone that I consider to be a really standout individual, it always begs the question to me, having a small background in like childhood psychology, what is it? What was the cauldron in which Mel was sculpted that made you the person you are today at the very start of your life?
I guess that I'm trying to think about, like, there's no defining moment because I had great parents who did the best that they could with what they were handed in terms of their own childhoods and patterns and thinking. And I grew up in a tiny little town where nothing really happened. But one thing did happen, and that was in the fourth grade. I was at a family kind of ski trip thing. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and one of the kids was on top of me. And yeah, like on top of me, molesting me. We're going here like fast. I mean, you asked like what was the thing, and this was like the first thing that popped into mind. And it was interesting because I didn't remember the experience for a very long time. I did not remember that this had happened until I was in my late 20s. And if you look at the spectrum of what can happen to somebody in terms of sexual abuse, which unfortunately is very common experience for people, this was a very mild experience. Like, it wasn't anybody that I knew. It was a one-off. It was another kid. So clearly something was happening to this kid in their life. It wasn't scary. It was confusing. But I was awoken from a state of sleep. And I immediately felt and knew that something was wrong. And it's my first experience in my life of what psychologists call disassociating. I literally left my body and I rolled over, and I don't even remember how it ended because I wasn't in my body to be there. And the very next morning, I'll never forget this. I hid underneath the sheets because it was a big bunk room and all the kids left to go downstairs to get ready to go skiing. And I remember waiting until I thought it was quiet. I threw the comforter off. I went down these steep stairs. I turned the corner and there was my mom. And she was cooking breakfast with some of the other moms. And she turned around and she said, "How'd you sleep?" And I immediately, Stephen, wanted to tell her. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw the kid. And in that moment, split second child brain, I froze. And as much as I wanted to tell my mom, and I knew exactly what she'd do. I mean, she grew up on a farm. She had a spatula in her hand. She would have hit that kid into next week. But I didn't know what the kid was going to do. And in that moment, I lied. And I said, "Fine." And the day went on and nothing happened. And I believe whether it is a 30-year-long struggle with anxiety or a tendency to disassociate, or the fact that I was chronically lying when I was younger, in any moment when I felt uncertain, I had no idea how that singular moment set me on a course that would last decades before I realized that all of these patterns of behavior that I was struggling with, I didn't know why I lied. I didn't know why I felt so uncomfortable if I couldn't predict somebody's reaction. I couldn't understand why I would leave my body so many times. I couldn't understand why I had very few memories from my childhood. It wasn't until I started to understand human behavior, the way the brain learns patterns, the way that you need and can break patterns and replace patterns and learn new patterns, that I began this journey that I've been on for the past 10 years of understanding my own breakdowns, my own heartaches, my own struggles, and sharing what I'm learning with anybody who will listen. How's that for an answer?
Yeah. Did you ever tell anybody? When did you first tell someone about that incident?
Well, I never told anybody because it's like I forgot about it in that moment. Like I just suppressed what had happened. And There were lots of times in my life when I was a teenager, when I was in college, when I was in law school, particularly in law school, because my anxiety just came to a huge crescendo in law school, just completely out of control with my thoughts, with how I felt in my body. I had not been diagnosed yet with anxiety or anxiety disorder and had not been medicated, did not even know anxiety was a thing. So this would have been 1992 through 1994. And I didn't even remember it. And so I didn't even remember this incident until I was 28 years old. And I was sitting in like kind of one of these life improvement seminars where you're in a windowless conference room and everyone's got a name tag on. And there's a person up front. And this woman stands up and she was talking about how she had been molested when she was younger by a babysitter that her parents hired. And the story went on how she had been in therapy for a long time. She was starting to deal with the trauma of the experience. She had forgiven the babysitter. She had forgiven her parents, but she could not forgive her sister. And the person leading the seminar kind of looked at her and said, "Why? What's wrong with your sister?" And she said, "Well, I'm so angry that this babysitter was choosing me. And while I'm in this room getting abused, my sister is out there watching TV." And when she said that, I had an immediate memory. And there was this triggering moment where I was sitting in this windowless conference room at the age of 28, but I was physically in that bunk bed because what I remembered in that moment was, oh my God, when I woke up in the middle of the night with this kid on top of me, I looked to my right, my younger brother was sleeping in the bed right there. And my immediate thought was, I don't want this person to hurt him. And that's why I rolled over and stayed quiet. And so it was this woman telling the story about her sister that triggered me to remember it. And as soon as I remembered it, oh my God, I told my brother, I told my parents, I just started talking about it. I think that one of the things that I'm grateful for is that I process things by talking about it. Once the dam is open, baby, like the floodgates are coming. Like and so I tend to process things by speaking about it. And for me, it wasn't the incident itself that created a lot of grief for me, because I know, based on the work that I've done as a crisis intervention counselor, working with victims of domestic violence, the work I did as a criminal defense attorney, working for legal aid in New York City, and the amount of training that we got. And also just the amount of work I've done and studying that I've done on the subject of psychology and human behavior. I know that when a kid is doing that to another kid, it's being done to them. So even at the age of 28, I didn't even have any anger toward the person that did this to me. My anger was at myself. Why didn't I remember this? Why am I so fucked up? Why couldn't I have remembered this? Like the constant self-bashing. That is the piece that I think has been the thing that I've really struggled with.
Why am I so fucked up?
Yeah, why am I so fucked up? There's this incredible thing about the human design. So when you think about human beings, and as a parent, so my husband and I have 3 kids. One's 23, another one's 21, and then our son is 16. And as a young parent, I would often feel this incredible sense of awe. Like, it is remarkable how many babies are born when you think about how many things have to go right, you know what I mean, in the design of a human being. And there is so much elegance and beauty and sophistication and genius to the human design. It's just shocking. But there is one fundamental flaw that screws up everybody. And that is that when you're a little kid and things happen to you, you do not have the life experience and you do not have the support system to be able to process what is happening. And it could be anything. It could be something as serious as homelessness and poverty and systemic discrimination. It could be violence. It could be abuse in your home. It could be addiction, mental illness. It could be chaos in your household. It could be sexual abuse. It could just be a mother or a father who's so freaking critical or who is passive aggressive. So you wake up as a kid and you have no idea what you're going to wake up to. But when something goes wrong or something happens to you as a kid, you don't have the life experience or the support structure to basically go, whoa, this situation is fucked. Or these adults, somebody call the police. Like, this is not okay. You don't get to talk to me like no kid does that. The fundamental flaw in human design is that when something happens to you as a kid, you don't say, what's wrong with that kid? Or what's wrong with my dad? Or what's wrong with this situation? You say, what's wrong with me? We aim it back at ourselves. And then I think that, this then starts to build as a thinking pattern that there must be something wrong with me. That you aim everything that's happening out there back at yourself.
And you did that through your early adulthood, right?
I think everybody does. I really do. I think that when you're growing up, I believe that this happens around the age of 8 or 9 or 10. That no human being is born and hates themselves. We're actually wired for love. We're wired for connection. If you look at a kid who's 2 or 3 or 4, right, and they see a mirror, they don't look at it and go, ugh, my thighs are so fat. Like I can't, they look at the mirror and they put their hands up and they twirl and they kiss the mirror and they love the sight of themselves. And you and I don't remember this, but we loved the sight of ourselves too. And what happens, because that's your natural state, that's your wired state, in my opinion. You are wired for self-love. You are wired for self-acceptance. You are wired for self-worth. You are wired for self-respect. You're wired for resilience. I mean, when you think about a baby, none of us remember this, but you will literally fall down 77 times an hour and you'll just keep standing back up. So this resilience, this sense of empowerment, this sense of really being proud of yourself, of loving yourself, it is part of your design, your DNA, your birthright, but life happens. And it can happen 2 ways. If you grow up in a chaotic household, you start to absorb the message that something's wrong. And so you go into modes of behavior to protect yourself. And these patterns of behavior that you create to protect yourself get locked in your brain. But for everybody, so if you grew up in a wonderful household like I did, if you grew up in a place that you were very safe like I did, you still are going to experience some kind of trauma because trauma is deeply personal. And trauma at its simplest form is just a moment when your nervous system gets dysregulated, a moment where your whole body turns on an alarm. And when your whole body turns on an alarm, whether it's, there's the car pulling on the gravel driveway, the person that drinks and comes home and is abusive is pulling in, or, mom's got that expression on her face, I better not say anything. It can be small moments, big moments, but when your nervous system goes into a state of alarm, your brain kicks into, let's record everything in hyperspeed so we can remember this so I can protect you in the future. And that pattern locks. And that's why so many adults continue to stay trapped in patterns from their childhood that they don't even remember why they have them, how, like any of it. But for everybody, so that's sort of like if you grew up in a chaotic household, which I didn't. But I think what happens developmentally is, there's this moment when we're in elementary school, and none of us remember it, or at least I don't remember it, but it happens to everybody, where one day you walk into elementary school and you're like loving yourself and you're happy as a clam and you're just kind of walking up to whomever and you like yourself and you love yourself. So you'll go up to anybody. You'll sit with anybody in the cafeteria. And then I don't know what the hell happens, but the next day you walk into that cafeteria, you got your little hands on your tray and you start scanning the room for where you're going to sit. And all of a sudden, that brain that is wired for self-love and self-acceptance flips into the sorting hat from Harry Potter. And you all of a sudden see the world in the places that you belong and the places that you don't. And that's how it begins. And your mind starts to tell you, you can't go there. You don't look like those kids. Those are the sports kids. They're going to, as a way to protect you. But the message that you start to get from your own brain or from society at large or from what's going on in your household is that who you are is not okay.